Hi everyone, and welcome to Belinda's DIYs. In this video, I've put together some of my older previous fall Dollar Tree DIYs. Some of you are new to my channel, so you probably haven't seen these fall DIYs. I'll be showing you a couple of fall centerpieces that I've put together, some jack-o'-lanterns. I'll even show you some ideas to decorate your coffee bar to give it a fall cozy look. This video will be longer than most, so grab yourself some coffee, tea, or your favorite cold drink. And now, let's go ahead and get started. These are the items that I'll be using for this project. First up is this fall box decor, some letter stickers, a wooden pumpkin decor, a couple of wooden dowels, and from this checker game I'll be using the round circles, some fairy lights, Dollar Tree has these at the moment, and a mix of fall bouquets, along with some spring greenery, a piece of foam board, and I'll be using this truck pattern that I drew myself. I was inspired by this Dollar Tree fall decor, I just made it in the smaller scale. Some acrylic paints in the color white and the color harvest orange, black, burnt umber, and also country gray. Some Waverly chalk paint in the color agave. The first thing that I did is draw my pattern, and I started off with just regular copy paper. And then I traced it on a cardboard type paper, that way it would be thicker and it would be easier when I would trace it onto my foam board. Next, I'm going to trace out the pattern onto the foam board. Now I'm ready to go ahead and cut it out using my box cutters. And now that I've cut it, I'm just going to clean the edges a little bit. The next thing that I'm going to do is draw out the back window and also the tires. And this is how it's looking so far. Before I start to paint it, I'm going to go ahead and erase all the pencil marks all around the edges. Next, I'll be drawing the backlights, and I'm going to be using a penny as my pattern. And this is how it turned out, and now I'm ready to start painting it. I'll be using the Waverly chalk paint in the color agave, and I'm just going to paint the truck, and I'm just going to go around the back window and around the backlights. I'll also be painting the edges. And this is how it's looking so far. Next, I'll be painting the tires with black paint. And then lastly, I'll be painting the backlights and also the back window using the color country gray. Okay, now I'm going to let this dry for just a few hours. The next thing that I want to do is soften up that blue and also give it a rustic look to my truck. So I'm going to lightly brush some white paint on it. Next, I'm going to add some white lines down the center of the tires just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And this is how it turned out. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is make a cart, and I'm going to be using the box decor for that, but I'll be using these round checkers for the wheels. And as you can see, the edging is very thin, so there isn't much for them to hold onto the box. So I'll be using some foam board to create a filler for them. So I'm just going to trace around the checkers and then cut them out. And I'll be creating these fillers for the rest of the checkers. I'll be using my box cutters to cut out the circles. Once I have my foam circle, I'm just going to add some hot glue to the checker and then just place the foam circle on it. And here is my wheel. I will be doing the same thing to the other 3 checkers. Okay, so now I'm ready to start painting them, and I'll be using the color black. Okay, so now I'm going to set them aside and let them dry. Okay, so now I'm going to start working on the cart, and it's this box decor. Now I'm going to remove that little hanging thing that it has, and all I have to do is just give it a little pull and it comes right off. Okay, so now I'm ready to paint my box, and I'm going to start first on the inside, and then I'm going to work my way out to the sides. And I'll be using the color Burnt Umber. Now I'm just going to let this dry for a few hours. Okay, so now that the paint is dry, I'm going to start brushing on the color Country Gray. I want to give this a rustic look to it, so I'll be using the dry brush technique. And this is how it turned out. Next, I'm going to go ahead and now start adding the wheels to my cart. And the foam side is the one that's going to go against the cart. And this is how this side looks, and now I'm going to do the other side. Okay, now I'm going to create the handle for my cart. And all I did was just cut about 1 inch off from the dowel stick. Next, I'm going to sand off the edges just so that it's nice and smooth. And now I'm ready to hot glue them together, and I'm just going to put just a small dot of glue there at the top of the dowel, and then I'm going to place that 1 inch dowel across. Next, I'm going to paint it with the color black. Okay, so now for my pumpkins, what I'm going to do is just pull them apart. Now I have all these pieces of wood. I'll only be using the 2 smaller ones, and what I'm going to do is now sand the edges off because I will be using them. Okay, I apologize. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. What I did is just glue the pumpkins onto those small little boards because I used them as a stand. And now I'm ready to paint them. I'm going to start with this pumpkin, and I'm going to use the orange color. And for the stem, I'm going to use the color Burnt Umber. And for this other pumpkin, I'm going to use the color Country Gray. Okay, so now I'm going to let these dry, and then once they're dry, I'm going to distress them just a bit. Okay, so for both of the pumpkins, what I'm going to do is dry brush some Burnt Umber color going down, almost like making some lines to the pumpkin, but not very defined. And this is how it turned out, and I'll be doing the same thing to the other one. And this is how the gray one turned out. Okay, so now for the letters, what I'm going to do is paint the ones that I'm going to be using. And I'll be spelling out the word fall and also harvest. And so I'm going to be using a sponge to paint the letters. For the word harvest, I did use the color white and I did have to give it several coats. Okay, so now that the paint is dry, I'm ready to add the word fall to my truck. And once I place them where I want them to be, I'll just press down on them, make sure that they adhere well. And then I spelled out the word harvest to my cart. What I'm going to do next is poke holes in the backlights, and I'm going to be using a screwdriver for that. And this is how it looks. I'll do the same thing to the other one. Now I'm ready to hot glue my truck onto my cart. And I'm going to be putting a little bit of hot glue there down at the bottom where the tires are at, and then press it against the cart. Next, I'm going to be adding both of the pumpkins into the cart, and they slip right in. Next, I'm going to hot glue the handle onto the gray pumpkin. And now I'm ready to add the lights, and I'm going to put one of the fairy lights coming through one of the holes, and then I'll put the other one into the other headlight, and that way it looks like the truck is lighted up. I did add some hot glue there at the back just to keep the wire in place. And then I put the pumpkins back into the cart, and then I just wrap the fairy lights around down at the bottom. And this is how it looks, all lighted up. And then I added all the florals in, and this is how it turned out. And for this next DIY, these are the items that I'll be using. 2 mason tea jars from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using 2 fall leaves. I'll be using some acrylic paint in the color Spice Carrot. And I'll be using some regular tape, but you can use 2-sided tape if you choose to. I'll also be using 2 of the tea lights that I also purchased at the Dollar Tree. Okay, so now here I'm gonna go ahead and just put my leaf in front of my jar, and I just wanna make sure that I place it right in front of the little tea light. That way when I turn on the little candle, it'll show right in front. So that's what I'm doing right there. Okay, so now I'm gonna start cutting little pieces of my regular tape, and I'm going to place it behind my leaf. And I'm going to put several pieces because I'm going to attach that leaf to my jar. So I want to make sure that it adheres well, so when I start painting, my leaf won't move. Okay, so now that I've put all my tapes behind my leaf, it's time for me to go ahead and place it right there on my jar. Okay, so now I'm just smoothing out my leaf. That way the tape can stick really well to the jar. And so I'm just smoothing it out, and you're gonna have little pieces of tape that come out. And so what I'm doing there is I'm kind of pressing it in behind my leaf. And I'm just adding some more tape where is needed. And I just continue to smooth out my leaf. That way it's nice and smooth and it's ready for me to start painting. Okay, so I start to paint my jar, and I'm holding my leaf really close with my finger. That way it won't move. So even though it has tape behind, I still want the little edges to come out really well. One thing that I do want to mention though is I really didn't like how it looked once I removed the leaf. So what I did is I went back with my brush and I just kind of made straight lines because the leaf had little jagged edges, but it didn't really look good. So that's why I went back with my brush and I just made straight lines. So when you see the end result, you'll see what I'm talking about, how the edges are straight and they don't have little jagged edges. Okay, if you're wondering where I got those leaves, I got them from an old fall garland that I had. I just clipped off 2 of the little leaves that I would be needing. But you can get some of those fall leaves at Dollar Tree as well. I've seen the little packages that have some loose fall leaves, so you can use those as well. I applied 2 coats of that acrylic paint. In some areas, the leaf started to lift, so I had to hurry up and finish painting. It was like crinkling up. And so I'm done with the first jar, and I'm gonna go ahead and start with my second one. Okay, so I'm done painting my jars, and now the big reveal. Today I'm going to be creating these pumpkins, and I'm going to be using some fabric and paint, and I'll be framing them with these Dollar Tree frames. I wanted to do something different with this antique mantle that I have here, and I really loved those picture frames that they have at the Dollar Tree. These right here remind me of just something old. And so I thought that these would be appropriate for this antique mantle. Although these picture frames come with a totally different picture, and you'll see it in a little bit, I just thought that these are just really nice just to put any picture. The frame itself looks expensive, but it only cost $1. These are the items that I used. I'll be using some pumpkins from this foam craft kit. 2 of these picture frames, and these are found in the Halloween section at the Dollar Tree. And 1 of these photo frames, and this one is the one that's the longer one that you can fit 3 pictures. And a piece of this fabric, and this Waverly fabric is found at Walmart. Some scissors. And this burlap. Now these are placemats that I made last year. I'll go ahead and link that video up above, but I purchased the burlap at Dollar Tree last year. I'll be using this acrylic paint in the color Spice Carrot. Some white acrylic paint. Some matte finish paint by Waverly in the color Mineral. Some Mod Podge, a permanent marker, some twine, a paintbrush, a paint dish, and my glue gun. Okay, I'm going to start by removing everything off this picture frame, and I am going to save the backing because I am going to use it. But I won't be using the glass, so I'm going to put that away. Now with these picture frames, you have to pop off that backing off. It's not hard at all, it snaps right off. I'll be using the backing of these as well. Now the backing of this picture frame, the long one, has these little pieces of metal. So I'm just gonna take those off because I don't want them to show through. Okay, so now I'm gonna paint the back side of both of the backings, and I'm gonna be using the Waverly paint. The color is called Mineral, and I use this color just so that it would be closer to the color of the burlap, and that way it could all blend together. Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is take one of those foam pumpkins, and I'm gonna make it smaller because as you can see, it doesn't fit in my frame. So I'm just gonna trim around the pumpkin and just get it to the size that I need for it to fit into this frame. I do wanna let you know that I cut it once and then I had to cut it again just to make it a bit smaller. Okay, now that my pumpkin is trimmed down, it'll fit perfect for this picture frame. Okay, next I'm gonna get a new foam pumpkin from this packet and I'm gonna use it as a pattern because I'm gonna cut out a piece of fabric using this pumpkin. I also cut out another pumpkin using the smaller foam pumpkin that I had cut out earlier, which gave me a total of 2. Okay, so next I'm going to be cutting pieces of burlap and I'm going to be using both of the backing of the picture frames as patterns. And I'm going to use my marker to outline them and then I'll be cutting them. I was able to fit the 2 round backings on this one piece of burlap. Dollar Tree carries these rolled up pieces of burlap. I've not seen them in my Dollar Tree this year, but you may be able to find them. If not, any piece of burlap will work. Okay, so next I'm going to be adding the fabric pumpkin onto the burlap. And as you can see, I've left the backing on there as well. Now I've already put some Mod Podge on the back of the pumpkin, and this is the smaller pumpkin. And now I'm just going to place the pumpkin on top of the burlap, and then I'm just going to brush on some more of that Mod Podge on top of the fabric. And I'll also be adding the little fabric stem to the top of the pumpkin. I somehow lost the footage in me showing you where I traced out the stem, but it also comes in the little packet of the foam pumpkin set. It has the little stem there, so I just used that. And this is how my first pumpkin looks, and now I'm just gonna put it away and let the Mod Podge dry. Okay, next I'm gonna paint stamp the pumpkin onto the burlap, and I'm just gonna paint on the back side of the foam as you see me right there, and then I'm just gonna press it down onto the burlap. And this is how it turned out. But I wasn't completely happy, so I went ahead and I paint brushed a little bit more of that orange paint. Here is the foam stem that I was talking to you about earlier. Now I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to brush on the paint on the back side, and then I'm going to press it onto the top of the pumpkin. And this is how this pumpkin turned out. I know I had mentioned that I didn't want to use orange this fall, but I couldn't resist for this project. Okay, for this longer picture frame, I've already Mod Podged the larger pumpkin onto it, as you can see right there. And so next what I'm going to do is just paint stamp the white pumpkin just underneath it, just like so. And then I'm just going to finish it off by adding the little pumpkin stem. And for this white pumpkin, I also did some more of that brush paint on it. And this is how this one turned out. Okay, so once the paint was dry and the Mod Podge was dry, I was ready to go ahead and add some of these bows right here. And all I did was just make little bows by using some of that twine, and I just double looped each one of them. And then I hot glued them all to the stem of all the pumpkins. Okay, so now I was ready to add all the frames onto my new projects. This next craft will be a fall wreath. These are the items that I'll be using. I'll be using this fall wall decor, and I'll just be using the inside portion. And 1 wire wreath, 2 of these decorative mesh ribbons, and 2 of these tulle ribbons, some mesh tube, some floral wire, some scissors, one to cut the wire and one to cut the ribbon, my glue gun, and a variety of these fall florals. Okay, I'm going to start by cutting a piece of that floral wire, and then I'm going to pass it through the ribbon and attach it at one end and then wrap it around the wire wreath. And I'll be attaching it on the back side of the wreath. And here I'm just showing you where I attached the wire, and I attached them to the outer portion of the wreath. Next, I'm going to wrap the mesh around the whole wreath, and I'm just going to go over and under and over and under until I cover the wreath completely with the mesh. Once I came to the end of it, I went ahead and I cut the ribbon, and I just gave it a little fold there in the edge, and then I added some hot glue. But I didn't really like that it wasn't sticking well, I guess because the mesh is just too meshy, I guess. I couldn't find the correct word. So I decided to reinforce it with some wire. And here I'm just showing you where I added the wire. And this is how the wreath looks now with the mesh. Okay, the first thing that I want to work on is making a big fat bow using the other mesh ribbon. So what I'm going to do is just pull out some of that ribbon, and then I'm going to fold it over and just continue to do that about 5 or 6 times. And the length is about 12 inches long. Okay, now that I have my mesh cut out, the next thing that I'm going to do is cut a piece of wire, then gather the center and wrap the wire around and tie it really well on the back side. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is just fluff out the bow, and how I'll do that is just by pulling each end until it all comes apart and just fluffs out. I'll be making bows also with the tool, and I'll be using the same technique. And here is how the bow looks all fluffed out. Here are both of the tool bows, and all I did is put one on top of the other, and then I'm going to attach them together with some of that wire. Here I'm just showing you how they look all stacked up together. But here are the tool bows that I made, and then I attached them there on the back, as you can see. And then what I'm going to do is stack the first bow that I made on top of the 2 tool bows, and it'll look something like this. And here is how it looks once I wrapped all the wire on all the bows. Next, I cut long strips of mesh to create those long tails. Then I attached it to the wreath, also using some more of that floral wire. Then I made another mesh tail using the cream color mesh. And this is how it looks with both of the mesh tails. Next, I'm going to go ahead and attach now my big fat bow onto the wreath. And this is what the wreath looks like now. And now I'm going to add the mesh tube, and all I did is just tie a bow and then just attach it there on the top of the big bow, and I actually made 2 of them, and I just hot glued them there in the center. Now moving on to the florals, I cut off the flowers and fall leaves from the stems to make it easy to hot glue them to the wreath. And this is what they look like, all cut up, and now I'm ready to attach them to the wreath. I first started with the fall leaves, and then I added the flowers and everything else. And this is what the wreath looks like with all its flowers. And then I attached the center of the wall decor in the center of the wreath, and I used some wire. I was trying to hot glue it, but it was not working for me, so I ended up using the floral wire instead. Today I'll be creating these jack-o'-lanterns. One will be a cat and the other one just a regular jack-o'-lantern. I'll be using all Dollar Tree items. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. The first one will be this orange jack-o'-lantern, and these are the items that I'll be using. One storage container, and this one has a grip here on the side. A piñata craft kit, a child's headband with a little hat, and this can be found in the Halloween department. One LED strobe light, a few of these wood pieces from the tower game, some twine, some Mod Podge, some acrylic paint in the color Spice Carrot. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is remove the label off this container. What I want to do next is get a transparent orange acrylic paint. So what I'm going to do is mix some Mod Podge with the Spice Carrot acrylic paint. So as you can see, I poured a generous amount of Mod Podge and I only put just a splash of that Spice Carrot color. And now I'm just going to mix them together. I noticed that it was still too light, so I went ahead and I added some more of the orange color. Okay, so now I'm ready to start brushing on the paint, and I'm just going to paint it all over. I'm not going to paint the bottom of the container, just all around the sides. Okay, now so what I'm going to do is set it aside and let the paint dry for a few hours. Next, I'm going to paint the cap, and I'm going to be using the same paint. Once I'm done painting it, I'm also going to set it aside and let it dry for a few hours. Next, I'm going to create the stem for the pumpkin, and I'll be using the tower game blocks for that. Okay, so here I've already set them up how I want them to be, so now I'm just going to glue them together. Okay, it was a little bit hard to explain how I glued these blocks together, so I think it's just easier for you just to see what I'm doing. Okay, so this is the bottom section of the stem, and now I'm going to create the top section, and all I'm going to do is just glue them in the same place that I glued the other ones, but these are just going to be stacked up. Next, I want to cover the seam where both sections meet, so what I'm going to do is just wrap some twine in the center, and all I'm going to do is just wrap some twine around and then hot glue it. Next, I'm going to create a bow using the same twine, and all I'm going to do is wrap it around a few times around my 4 fingers, and then I'm going to pinch the center and hot glue it and tie it. Next, I'm going to hot glue the bow in the center. I will be hot gluing the stem on top of the lid a little later on. Okay, so now I'll be using these stickers from the piñata kit, and I'm going to be applying the face to the front of the storage container. And this is how the jack-o'-lantern is turning out so far. Next, I'm going to hot glue the stem onto the lid. And this is how it turned out. Next, I'm going to put in the strobe light. And this is how it looks with the lights turned off. Next, I'll be creating this cat jack-o'-lantern, and these are the items that I'll be using. One storage container with a grip on the side, one LED strobe light, some Mod Podge, one pumpkin decorating kit, some acrylic paint in the color Admiral Blue, and also the color Candy Apple, and also some white. And also this black boa, and this can also be found in the Halloween department. Okay, so I need some purple acrylic paint, and since I don't have that color, I'm gonna go ahead and mix it. So I'll be mixing the blue and red acrylic paints. And then I'll be adding some white paint just to lighten up the purple. Okay, so now I'm gonna be adding some Mod Podge and then adding the purple paint to it. Okay, so now I'm ready to brush on the purple paint onto the container. I'm going to follow the same steps as I did to the other pumpkin. I'm going to paint the container all the way around, and I'm also going to paint the lid, and then I'm going to set it aside so that it can dry. Next, I'm going to work on this headband, and what I'm going to do is just remove the headband off the hat. And all I'm going to do is gently pull the glue apart until the band comes loose. The next thing that I'm going to do is hot glue the boa around the rim of the hat. And then I'm going to cut the excess boa, but I am going to leave a little tail. And then I'm just going to trim the feathers a little bit. And this is how it turned out, and I will be hot gluing it on the lid as well. Next, I'll be using the pumpkin decorating kit to create the face for the cat. The first thing that I do is start taking out the pieces, and then I kind of play around to kind of figure out how I'm going to create the face of the cat. And once that I do that, then I start putting everything together. Okay, so I start by adding the nose, then the eyes, and then the whiskers, and then a little extension to the nose, and then the mouth. I really didn't like the way that black lace looked, so I went ahead and I cut it off the hat. Next, I hot glued the hat onto the lid. Next, I placed the LED strobe light inside the container. And this is how the cat turned out. And this is how both jack-o'-lanterns turned out. If you prefer not to have the LED strobe lights, you can use the push button LED lights. That is what I did with these here. I just dropped them in there, and this way it's just a steady white light. For this fall centerpiece, these are the items that I'll be using. I'll be using 2 foam boards, some black shoe polish, some black acrylic paint, and some white acrylic paint, a paintbrush, some rubber gloves, a measuring tape, a ruler, a box cutter, a glue gun, and I'll also be using some of my pumpkins that I DIY'd from the Dollar Tree. And I also DIY'd this stand, 1 pack of this Excelsior, 2 LED window candles, some greenery, a piece of this pool noodle. For the base, I'm going to cut 2 pieces measuring 21.5 inches by 7. And for the side panels, I'm going to cut 2 21.5 by 3 inch panels. Also 2 smaller panels measuring 7.5 by 3 inches. I started by measuring the base of the box. Now I went ahead and I cut 2 pieces for the base because I wanted it to be pretty sturdy. If you've used foam board from the Dollar Tree, you know that it's pretty thin. Now once I was done cutting the base, I went ahead and I moved on cutting the side panels. Okay, so I'm done cutting all the pieces that I'm going to need, my 2 bottom bases, the 2 side panels, and then the 2 smaller side panels. Okay, so I'm going to start by hot gluing the bases together. Now I have to tell you that I had to be really careful once I added the hot glue because you only have seconds, and if it's not glued on right, your boards are going to be off. So I started by adding a generous amount of hot glue to one of the boards, and then I placed the other one on top very carefully. And this is how they look once they've been glued together, and I just want you to see how thick the base looks. Next, I moved on to the side panels, and I was so very nervous doing the side panels because I was afraid that I was not gonna hot glue them correctly and that the side panel would be off. Okay, so I have one side panel on, and now I'm going to move on to the other side. But for now, I'm just making sure that it is glued on correctly and it's not off. And so here I'm just showing you what it looks like with this first panel on. Now moving on to the second one. For extra hold, I added a strip of hot glue in the inner portion where both of the foams meet. Okay, so here's my box now that I've added all the panels, and I just want you just to take a look at it. And here I'm just showing you where I added a thin layer of hot glue in the interior just to give it a bit of a reinforcement. And I am a bit of a perfectionist, and I have to tell you there was areas where the foam didn't quite meet, so I did have to take my utility knife and just chisel some of the foam off. But in the end, the box turned out pretty nice. Okay, so next I'm going to be adding the black shoe polish to the box, and I'm just gonna lightly just brush it on there. The shoe polish comes already with a little foam on the end, and you do have to press down on the foam so the liquid can start running. And I am pressing it down here on the table because I don't want to press it onto the foam. If not, it'll make indentions. This is the first time that I use shoe polish on foam board, so I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, and that's why I started off with just a thin coat. But when I saw that it was doing fine and nothing was happening to the foam board, I went ahead and I added a little bit more of the shoe polish until I got the color that I desired. Now the look that I'm going for this box is a weathered look wood, and so that's why I chose the black shoe polish. I didn't think that black paint would give me the effect that I was looking for. So the shoe polish worked out perfect because it just gave it that black wash look. So it gave me a great base color. Okay, so this is how it turned out with just the shoe polish. Now it looks okay, but I'm still not quite happy with it. So I'm going to be adding now the acrylic paint. I also added some of that shoe polish in the inside panels as well. Next, I added some acrylic paint, and what I did is I mixed some black and white paint to get almost like a light gray color. And then I just started to lightly brush it on the side panels as I'm showing you right there. I had to go in with a very, very light hand. And I just continued doing that to all sides until I got the color that I wanted. And then I also moved on to some black, and I also just added a little bit of black here and there. I even had thought of maybe adding a little bit of a light green, but I decided not to. I just kept it with those neutral colors. There is no right or wrong way. When you work with paint, it really is up to you and what colors you want to use. I think that one of the most important things is to keep in mind is when you are blending colors together is just having a very light hand. Please note, I am no artist, I just like to play around with acrylic paint. And this is how the paint turned out. I think that it does have that weathered look to it. Okay, so now that my box is complete, I'm going to start adding all the items in there. And I'm going to start by hot gluing pieces of the pool noodle on the base of the box. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is because I'm going to be setting 2 of the pumpkins on top of the pool noodles. So I want the pumpkins to have some height. Next, I'm going to add this stand that I DIY'd myself to the center of the box. And all this is a candle stand and a candle plate hot glued together. Next, I'm going to add the Excelsior inside the box. Next, I'm going to add the pumpkins. Next, I'm going to add some greenery, and I just continue to go all around the box. Now, if you decide to do this project, you can add whatever you want. Even some fall leaves would look really nice, but I wanted this to have some green to it, so that's why I added some greenery. Next, I added the candles before I started adding the greenery on that side. Okay, beauties, here is my Dollar Tree box pumpkin centerpiece. And here is another pumpkin centerpiece that I created, and this is totally different with different color of pumpkins, but using the same box. I'll be using these peel and stick poster stickers, some matte Mod Podge. I'll also be using a variety of these foam pumpkins, and these are from Dollar Tree except for one of them. This one right here is from Hobby Lobby. And this vase that I DIY'd a while back, I'll go ahead and link that video up above. Some jute twine, and this box that I DIY'd a while back. Some craft paper roll, some Waverly chalk paint in the color white, some acrylic paint in the color auber green, also some Admiral blue, some country gray, some spice carrot, and some burnt umber. And some of this greenery, and I got these from Walmart. Some eucalyptus, and I got these at Walmart as well. Some cotton stems from Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using these stickers, and I'm going to be spelling out Farm Fresh, but the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to paint them white. So I'm just going to use a little bit of that Waverly chalk paint and then just use a sponge to just sponge on some paint on them. This is just an easy fix when you want some white letters and they are black. You can easily turn them whatever color you want just by adding some color. Because the letters are black and I'm putting white, I am going to have to give them several coats of paint. For these two pumpkins, I'm going to paint them in the color blue-green. So I'm going to have to mix some myself. I didn't have that color on hand. So I started with the blue color and then I added the green. And then I'm just going to continue adding the green to the blue until I get the color that I want. Okay, so now I'm ready to start painting them. I'll be giving them one coat of paint and then letting them dry and then give them a second coat. And then for these other two pumpkins, I'm going to be painting them with the color gray. And I'll also be giving them 2 coats of paint. And now for the light orange color, I'll be mixing some white into the orange. And then lastly, I'll be painting these other 2 pumpkins with this color. I'll also be giving 2 coats of paint for these as well. Before I started painting the pumpkins, I removed their stem, and what I'm going to do is just add some twine. All I'm going to do is add some hot glue to the stem and then just wind the twine around the stem. And then for the top, I'll just pinch it and it'll close up the top. And here are the rest of them that I did. Okay, so I wanted the twine to be darker, so what I'm going to do is just sponge on some burnt umber, and this color will give the stem a nice rustic look to it. I'll be painting all the stems. Okay, so now I'm ready to add the stems to the pumpkins. Okay, so now I'm ready to add the letters to my box, and I'm going to start by putting this white dot right there in the center. I did have to adjust my letters a few times until I got the words centered just right. And then once I was happy with them, I went ahead and I pressed the letters down to make sure they would adhere well. Now to seal off the letters, I'm going to be brushing on some Mod Podge over them. And just to give a protective coating to the box, I went ahead and I added Mod Podge all the way around the box. And now I'm going to give this a few hours until it dries. Okay, now that the Mod Podge is dry, this is how the box turned out. Okay, so now to start with my centerpiece, I am going to add this vase filled with pumpkins right there in the center. And to fill up the box, I'm going to use some of these Dollar Tree plastic bags. Next, I'm going to cut a few strips of this craft paper roll. And then I'm going to cut that strip in half, and then I'm going to crumble them up. And then I'm going to place the paper over the plastic bags. I noticed that my vase was sitting too low, so what I did is add a small candle holder, and all I did was just turn it upside down, and then I added my vase on top of it, and that way it gave it the height that I was wanting. Next, I added some eucalyptus. Next, I added these green fuzzy leaves. And then I started to add my pumpkins. And then lastly, I added the cotton stems. And this is how it turned out. In this last video, I'm going to show you how I decorated my coffee bar and all the items that I used. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I want to start by showing you all the items that I'll be using in my coffee bar. And there is quite a bit of items, I know. But some of these things I DIY'd, and I'll go ahead and link all those videos down below in the description box. You're probably wondering, what is her color scheme? She's got so many different colors, and I know I do. But I did want to use orange. Last year I didn't use it as much, so this year I wanted to use more of those fall colors. I'll be using these Ray Dunn inspired coffee cups, and these I DIY'd just a while back. I'll link the video down below, but I'll be using these two black ones. I absolutely love them. And I also DIY'd these two orange ones. Now these I don't have a video, but I just decided to DIY these just really quick and fast. And this one says pumpkin spice, and then this other one says it's fall, you all. I really love this one. And I'll also be displaying this coffee mug, and this one I purchased at Hobby Lobby. I saw it and I said I need to have it in my life. I think it's so adorable, so I'll be using this one as well. I apologize, I couldn't get the camera to focus. And I'll also be using this buffalo check tray, and this I DIY'd also, and I'll go ahead and link that video down below. And I'll also be using several of these pumpkins, some to fill up my 2-tier wire basket, and then just some just to scatter here and there. Now for these Dollar Tree velvet pumpkins, I will be DIYing these, and this is that craft that I was talking to you about. I'll also be using these pumpkin wooden stickers, and these are from Dollar Tree. And I'll also be crafting with these wood dowels. And I'll also be using this little wire basket, and this is something that I DIY'd. I'll go ahead and link that video down below. And here is another DIY of mine, and this is a farmhouse door, and I'll also be using this. And once again, I'll link that video down below. I'll also be using this Dollar Tree jar, and I'll also be using this fall candle from Bath & Body Works. And I'll also be using some of this greenery for my DIY. Okay, so now let me start with the Target Dollar Spot haul. The first thing is this cute fall truck. I'm in love with this truck. This was only $3. I won't be using this truck in my coffee bar, but I will be displaying it somewhere else. Now here is another fall truck, and this one is the gray one, and it is so adorable. Now this one I will be placing it in my coffee bar. And I finally found this 2-tier wire basket that many were hauling, and I just couldn't find it at my Target, but I finally found it, so I'm really excited, and I will be using this in my coffee bar. And this was only $5. And I also found this farmhouse. This is just so adorable. I love that the roof is black and that the house is white. I'll be using this house in my coffee bar, but I'll also be using it year-round. And this was only $5, and what I love is it also lights up inside. And I also found 2 of the smaller size farmhouses, and these are ceramic. And here is the other one, and they also light up. They were only $3, and I will be using this one in my coffee bar. And I also purchased these velvet pumpkins. These were only $1. I love the way the stem looks because it looks very realistic. So I purchased this gold one, and this mint green, and this blue one. And I also purchased this cutting board, and this is only $3, but it is a good size. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first small DIY, and all I'm going to do is get some of those dowels, and then I'm going to hot glue those wooden pumpkins up at the top because I am going to place them where I have my stir sticks. And this is how they turned out, and I just did 4 of them. For the next DIY, I'm going to stack up 2 pumpkins on top of each other, and I'm going to place them on top of this Dollar Tree glass candle holder. But before that I can stack them up, I need to remove one of the stems of the pumpkin, and it's going to be the orange one. And all I had to do was just give the stem a little pull and it came right out. But before that I stack them, I'm going to start adding some greenery to the top of the candle holder. And this is how it turned out. Okay, so now I'm ready to add the first pumpkin, and I'm going to add the one that doesn't have the stem. Next, I'm going to add some more of that greenery on top of the pumpkin. And this is how it turned out. And then I hot glued the white pumpkin on top, and then I put a little bit of greenery on the white pumpkin, as you can see there, and this is how it turned out. Okay, so we're gonna start decorating my coffee bar, and I'm gonna start first by cleaning it with this Miss Meyer's Cleaning Multi-Surface, and this is in the apple cider scent. So that's the first thing that I'm gonna do. I was writing on my chalkboard, and there's a whole bunch of chalk dust all over the top, so I need to clean it really well. This was something that I just decided to put on my chalkboard. It says pumpkin spice and all things nice. This is actually a DIY that I did. I had purchased this antique buffet, and then I added this chalkboard. Well, actually it wasn't a chalkboard. It was a piece of board that was from another vintage vanity that I had. Then I went ahead and I added the shelf right here. So I'll go ahead and link all the items that I'm going to be telling you that I DIY'd. I'll put them down in the description box. That way when you have time, you can go and check them out. So I like to use mats like this to put it underneath my coffee maker. Just in case there's some coffee that might spill over or some hot water. I don't want it to ruin my cabinet, so I like to use this mat underneath. And this I purchased at Dollar Tree a while back. I really hope that you enjoyed these fall DIYs. I know that the video was pretty long. I thank you if you stayed to the end. Please comment down below and let me know which was your favorite DIY. You have yourself a blessed day, and until my next video, bye-bye and God bless.